Hi guys, GYRO here, back with another video. So this is the video I promised a while back, the ma020 counter steer CS drift modification video. So what I've done today is to make things a little bit easier. I'm going to try and use the same rear axle, solid rear axle from my ma030 video, where I moved the cog along to give space for the CS drift gear. So the best thing to do is to check out the video that I did before, particularly the section where I'm modifying this, and I'll put a link below with a timestamp so you can get to it easily. And I'll also have a link up here in the corner if you need to go across there and watch that before you watch this one. So this is the exact same gear I had in the rear of the ma030. The reason I've done that is so my selection of teeth I know will fit with this gear. I already know is a 15 teeth. So in that previous video I used a 15 teeth, I think GYRO racing gear for the main pinion that was going to engage the differential, sorry, the solid axle. So we're doing the same thing again. This time it's a 15 teeth mini Z gear that I've got here. Now I can't remember if this was included in my all-wheel drive set. I'll have to check. I think this may be off a another set, but it's definitely a mini Z gear and it's a 15 teeth. The GYRO racing 15 teeth work just as well, or any other cog that you can find that's 15 teeth for mini RC will be the same size. Okay, so this we're going to hollow out so it looks like that. I'm going to zoom in. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this hollow like this gear here. So this is a larger gear that I used on another model, which is for another video, but here we want to use the same size that we used in the previous video about CS drift so that we know our rear axle will engage. So we have to hollow this gear out. Now this is something I saw Mr. Beaver do on his hobby channel, on his WL Toys CS mod video, which I will link below as well. And we're going to use a hand drill to clean this out and make it larger so that, let's zoom back out again, so that it will fit over our main gear like so. The reason I wanted to fit over this main gear is I don't want to cut this gear off, because the axle that connects into here is what decides, which engages the axle and makes the gear turn. If we were to chop this gear right down, try and glue this on, then the axle inside would spin. It's less work and easier to do if we can just get the gear to seat over here, because we'll know it's roughly the right distance and we also know that it will fit. The only problem with this modification on the ma020, particularly this one, which is a long wheelbase version, but I'm using it because it's easier to demonstrate. The problem you have is because of the length of this gear, if you haven't got it glued on nicely and straight, instead of spinning true, it'll spin lopsided. Let's see if I can do this from here and show you. So you can see that's quite lopsided. We want it straighter than that. Okay, let the fun begin. The size of hole we want, I'm going to measure this now and show you. 4.3 millimeters. Now I'd probably go with 4. So the drill I'm going to go up to is actually a 3.8. I'd rather be slightly undersized. That's about 3.8. I'd rather be slightly undersized hole than make it a little bit bigger, than make it too big and then it will fly around everywhere, it'll be loose. So the other thing we have to do as part of this modification, which I haven't done yet for this car, is put in this front one-way differential. So that's going to be part of the video too, although you can refer back to the previous video where I installed it in the ma030. It's a very similar process, but I'm going to focus on actually making the CS gear in this video. So you saw the Civic doing its little loops on the table earlier, so that's our base point to work from. So the way I do this is I will start with I start with a very thin drill and work my way up. We don't want to be too aggressive and go too large, otherwise you'll find that you end up just making a wonky hole rather than a straight hole. So I'm starting with quite a small drill here that'll just about squeeze through. See, that went through quite easily. And we're just trying to keep the rotation neat. And be very careful when you're doing this, guys. It's, you know, if you've got any qualms, wear some safety gloves so you're not going to poke your fingers or get someone else to do it. This is not for kids to do. I have put a drill in my finger before and it does hurt. Okay, so that's one, and you can see the hole is larger now. So we move up a drill. So obviously this also depends on what you've got available, but certainly you can get most of these hand drills from most hobby stores or eBay. So again, slide it in, fairly gentle with it. Don't try and force it, just let it go through. Now even this is probably a little bit too large. I can see a lot of plastic coming away, but the more time you spend doing this, the better your CS gear is going to be. So unlike the ma030 where we could just slide the gear over the end of the shaft, you can't do that with the ma020. And that's because of the way the motor is set up at the front of the ma030. You only have to change the rear pinion to change the gear ratio between the front and rear. So you can see, even though it's gone through, I'm going through again and again and again with the same size, over and over and over. So I'll keep doing this until it starts to move backwards and forwards freely. So it's still kind of stiff there, so it's not quite ready to move on to the next drill. So I'll go down again. Until it starts sliding up and down quite easily. So it's still a little bit on the tight side. So we'll do it again. Now this does get a bit monotonous, so I may forward through this section if it's just me doing the same thing over. Now this bit of the gear here is eventually just going to disappear, or you'll have to sand it off. The reason I haven't done that first is it just makes an extra guide to keep it as straight as possible. If you cut it off first, then you've got less of a channel in the gear to keep everything neat, to keep the shaft and the center aligned. Okay guys, so as you can see here, I'm working in real time. I've made the hole in the gear as demonstrated. Now I could have got away with not having to make this hole as big if I just sanded down this gear here and made it smooth or smaller, but I wanted to preserve the gear, try and keep it intact as much, and I'm only going to use hot glue to glue this on, because you can take it back off and the gear should be okay underneath. That's what I'm trying to do anyway. The alternative way is not to make this hole as big, run the motor, and while it's spinning, hold a file or something just to sand this down so it's an equal round shape. That's probably an easier way to do it, to make the hole easier on this end, but I've tried to preserve the gear. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I think once you've got a CS gear set up, you're probably not going to go back to a standard setup, but anyway, here we go. So you can see that fits on now. Here is the rear pod, where I've already installed the one-way from the ma030, not the one-way, sorry, the solid rear axle. So I'm going to try this on now just to see if it matches up roughly where I want it to. And if we've done everything right, it should do. That looks like it's not bad. Yeah, obviously we haven't glued it yet, but that looks like it matches and everything seems kind of free. So once we glue that in place now, I think we're going to be fine. Okay, so we'll glue that into position now. So to do that, we need a hot glue gun. Okay, so I forgot to press record while I was doing that, but we've glued that into position now. Let's get that closer. Let's turn the glue gun off. Sorry about that, I actually missed the whole point. But I put the glue at the bottom, not the top, so that it doesn't actually squish out and get in the way. The idea is we just want it strong enough to hold it in position. It should fit snugly already. Now at this point, I'm not even going to remove the excess. Well, actually I might remove that bit, it's annoying me. Let's just trim that off. Okay. let's connect up the rear pod and see what we've got. That looks pretty good. Right, okay, we have a CS Drift. Let's get this reassembled and get the front one-way diff in. Okay, time for the front one-way diff. This mat is magnetic, by the way. It helps hold everything in line, as in not line, but it keeps everything from flying around. So if you put your springs on it and your metal screws, they stay in place. Okay, let's get the diff out. Take the bearings off. We have rear CS, front one way. Okay, let's zoom out, let's show you what we got. The rear wheel should turn more than the front wheel. Okay, here we go. So, definitely there you can see. For one revolution of the rear wheel, you only get half a revolution of the front wheel. Excellent, we're good to go. Let's test it out. So guys, some fantastic drift footage there. So the mod has been done. We've got the 15T pinion on top of the regular gear, and that will work on whether it's a 90, 94 or 98 like this one. You just have to obviously glue it further down the shaft, that's all. As you can see, I've changed the tyres now to LF5s, which I had on my other ma030 counter steer setup, and these seem to work really well on my kitchen floor, almost better than the LF5s, which almost are too slippy because the surface I'm on is so slippy. So these LF3s work nicely for me. As you can see, I've also installed a gyro, which is sacrilege, but I couldn't drive the car efficiently without one to start off with. So I whacked the gyro on, turned it up to 100%, then gradually dialed it back as I started to get the hang of using the car with the counter steer setup. And you'll see in the footage that as it's going around, especially in circles, you can see the front wheels steering, counter steering, as the name suggests, as it goes around. The counter steer setup also seems to eliminate to some degree the weight imbalance on these cars where the batteries are on this side. As you could see in the before video when I was on the tabletop, the car was spinning out one way more than the other no matter what I did. I checked all the wheels, checked the suspension, still it was spinning one way more than the other. Putting the front one-way diff in did help, but switching to the wide rears and narrow fronts with the LF3s and this setup, absolutely perfect. Obviously I'm using a Synchro Touch, GYRO Synchro Touch for my adjusting of the car, so I can play around with things like the gyro settings from the transmitter. But I turned the EXP down a little bit, but to be fair, once the gyro was on and these tyres were on, the driving got very nice and quite a lot of fun. So it's definitely worth doing. So it's a 15T rear gear with the GYRO Mini Z fixed rear axle, where I've done the modification to the rear axle by removing some of the plastic to allow that gear to fit in, and obviously that was in the previous counter steer video, which you can go check out. Front one way, that's a Sino Hobby Mini Q front one way, works perfectly, didn't have to use any shims, straight in, off we go. So that is the counter steer setup for the ma020. If you like the video, give me a like. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll have some more videos for you soon. So see you guys all next time.